on my way here, I was thinking about what are like the 2 or 3 things that like are required in a good parenting relationship in a blended family.
Please.
Communication and grace.
Okay.
Because without communication, like this is why I'm asking, or I think I said last time, this is a parenting issue, not a step parenting issue. Like I'm just annoyed of my teenagers, period.
Yep.
And without any of that, or without him saying, hey, I need 10 minutes, it can spiral so quickly out of control because it is a very triggering environment. Grace, because none of us know what the hell we're doing.
Right.
And I have to assume that my spouse is coming from a good place with good intentions, and he needs to assume I am too. If I'm questioning his parenting and I'm not the biological parent, he has to assume that I'm coming from a place of, I just want us to be on the same page, not, oh, she thinks I'm a bad parent or she doesn't love my kids. I have to give him that grace of he's emotional. He's, these are triggers. These are things that are uncomfortable, and he has to have that same grace for me. And, she's never been a stepmom before this. So it's new to her also. She's never been a parent before this.
That is so good. You're amazing. You're therapy.
I was going to say shout out to my therapist.
Shout out doctor such and such. Sometimes life just sucks, and sometimes it freaking rocks. We will discuss all the things from family and real estate to travel and just life in general. So take a seat, or don't, you do you, and welcome to the Lumbattis podcast. Hi, Mrs. Donna Knoll.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. I was just going to say, welcome back to the Lumbattis podcast. Last time I introduced you as Ms. Donna Knoll, and I was like, that's so wrong.
I feel like I'm still young enough to be a Ms., right?
Well, I still have dreams that I'm in high school sometimes. Yeah. So one can dream, Donna, one can dream. Don't let me shoot you down. Okay, so one of the last times that I had you on here, we talked about step parenting, and I loved that episode. I'm not going to lie. I know there are people out there who film, not just podcasts, but TV series and movies and stuff like that. And they're like, I can't watch myself. Okay, listen, I go back and listen to see if I sound like an idiot or not.
I definitely listened to it.
Good.
It's the first podcast I was ever on. And I was like, wait, is that what I sound like?
I know.
But I when we did the one on reality TV, I was cracking up at myself. So I
laughed so hard. And the funny part is, I didn't even have my shit straight. I was just like, okay, I think she's 86, and then this chick's 25, and I was going back and forth, and I'm like, I was way wrong. But people at least get the gist of what I'm saying, so I'm here for it. Anyways, last time we talked about being a step parent, and I kind of want to dive a little deeper into that because as a step parent, I feel like there are so many people who are step parents. There are so many people who are step kids. I think it'd be really interesting to get the step kids perspective too.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, actually. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas on that.
Okay, well, we'll have to chit chat. But today, I kind of want to focus on being a step parent when, what am I looking for? When to the husband. You're not a step parent to the husband, but when you're trying to be a step parent with the husband who already is a parent, because I came into my situation when my husband was already a dad, and you came into the situation when your husband was already a dad. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to open up.
We were not bio parents yet at that time.
Yes, I was not a bio parent then either. I had no children of my own. So I think that the dynamic in that is huge, especially because I was 18 years old. I literally just had Jared in here filming, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, I just love him so much. And I can't even imagine if he were a dad or a step parent or going to be a step parent, if he was dating somebody with a kid.
Right? Can you even
think about your stepdaughter?
No.
Okay. Dating somebody 4 years older than her with a kid?
No.
Right?
No.
My parents weren't no at all. Where
20,
were you, Mom and Dad? No, I'm kidding.
I was 26 when I met Dan, and everyone in my family and my friends were like, no.
Really?
Oh, yeah. My best friends sat me down, and they were like...
They had an intervention?
Yes.
I need to hear this.
Well, I mean, it wasn't necessarily because he had kids. It was because of the situation with his ex-spouse and the stress it was causing.
Sure.
And they were like, we've never seen you this stressed out. And I'm like, well, it's not his doing.
I know.
It's out of his control.
I know.
And I was like, and I love him so, too late. Sorry.
And we're engaged, by the way.
Yeah, they were concerned, right? And rightfully so. And I think that's, it just can be so great and it can be so awful. And a lot of the times it's in between. But I think it's very normal for people who love us to worry about us in situations that aren't traditional.
That's very true. And maybe because Jacob's mom was so wonderful and, I didn't have any, they weren't married, that sort ever. Not at the time, obviously, but they weren't ever married. So I think that helped too. But I kind of want to talk about how it is because, again, it was very different for the both of us. Me parenting Jacob was literally being like his best friend and being like, do you want to go get ice cream after school? Like that was the extent of my parenting. I got to be the fun stepmom because I didn't have to parent him. But I know that it was very different from you. So I want to know how it was from the perspective of husband and wife, parenting children who weren't yours. Like what was Dan's expectations of you? Like how did that all work out?
Well, lesson number 1, talk about what those expectations are early.
Ding, 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 ding.
We didn't really talk about that in that way.
Do you think that's because at first everything's so new and exciting and you're just having fun and having great sex and doing all those things? I hope your kids don't listen to the podcast. Sorry if they do. But you're allowed to have good sex.
I think that for us, one, we were long distance for a year. So
That's
it was kind
true.
of like we were just getting to know each other and we weren't putting the heavy stuff on quite yet.
Right.
But I think it was his first time co-parenting with a non-biological parent too.
Oh, good point.
I don't know what his relationship was like with his ex-spouse. I have heard things. I can gather things.
Sure.
And from my understanding, it almost was like they were co-parenting separately anyways.
Okay.
So even at that point, it doesn't seem like he truly had a partner in the way that I imagined being a partner. And so I don't think he even knew what to ask for or what to expect because he didn't know that.
I love that. I think you're so right. So how did you work through that? Before you answer that question, that's my question though, because if my ADD kicks in, I want to make sure you remember it. For me, David and Sarah it was just like, okay, you have him here, I have him there. And it kind of just like
flowed, but it was a business transaction almost.
Yes, yeah. Very, very much so. So this was the first time David was, they co-parented in the sense of they both parented Jacob separately. Right. So they co-parented in that sense and they got along for him and everything in that sense. But like actually parenting with somebody, I think was very different from him too. And granted, especially when he was little, we didn't have him all that much anyway. So it's not like we were making this massive impact on him until, in my opinion, he was older. But I do feel that the expectations, we didn't talk about that either. It wasn't like, this is what I think you should do and this is how I think you should do it. I was always like, you've been doing this longer than me, so what you want to do?
Well, we had expectations of how I would interact with them. So like I talked about last time a little bit, I moved to Newport by myself to make my own friends, to make my own life so that I wasn't just dumping myself on them, right?
Right.
That sort of thing we talked about. Parenting, we talked about in the sense of what are our values.
Okay.
When we were dating, that was something we literally sat down and we each wrote separately like our top 10 values. And then we compared them and like 8 of the 10 aligned. And that was part of the reason why I was like, okay, this can work because at the foundation we have similar morals and values.
I'm thoroughly impressed.
I had to be sure, Lauren. I was about to move 3,000 miles across the country.
That's totally fair. It's just crazy to me. I think when I started dating David, this is going to sound so sad. I think he just wanted somebody who was going to love him even though he had Jacob.
Yeah.
Because when David found out Jacob was coming, David was dating somebody else. And if I'm not mistaken, so was Sarah. Like, this clearly was not a planned thing. Yeah. So can you imagine, can you even fathom being 18 or 19 or 20, however old they were at this time, and finding out that the guy that you are dating, and everything's new, so you're all smitten and everything, and you're in love. Not really, but you're in love. And you find out that he's having a kid with somebody else.
Hell no.
What the what the fuck?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. So a part of me, even towards her, is like, oh, that's so crazy. Like my mind is boggled by that. So I can see David's fear of being like, I really just want you to love me, even though I have a kid. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I was so invested because I met Jacob fairly early on, but we had no idea like where this was going. So I just got to be the fun friend that was around. It's not like, we were doing anything inappropriate where Jacob would think that I was anything other than David's friend. But it was very interesting to that on our first date when he was like, I have a kid, right? Like, that's exactly his words to me. And he was like, oh God, yes. Why? And he was like, okay, I just want to make sure that that's cool with you. Now my 40-year-old mind can go back to that moment and be like, sweet baby, he just wanted to make sure that he was going to be loved. So your situation is definitely different because like you said, you were moving 3,000 miles away.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of due diligence on my own part,
Good.
right?
Because we didn't sit down and write no values. I was like, hey, you're not going to cheat on me, right? And he's like, yeah, you're going to like my kid, right? Like that's the extent of our values were.
Yeah, I was, I was serious about it. And also I knew I needed to be serious about it because he did have kids. But we definitely did not talk about what are your expectations of how I'm going to come in and parent, or if this happens with your kid, then what do we do? We kind of just flew by the seat of our pants and figured it out, right? But over time, I realized, one, I'm pretty blunt.
Spit it out.
I'm pretty blunt. I believe in what I believe, and I didn't filter myself a lot. So if I thought decisions were being made that weren't great, I would say something. If I thought things should be done another way, I would question it. And, over time that did cause some issues, right?
Okay, so wait, I have to have your back here because I feel like I am very direct as well. But my dad always says be direct and respectful. So if you weren't being respectful, that's one thing. But being direct, I think, is doing your relationship a massive, a massive, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a massive service. Like ain't nobody got time to sit here and Millie Mouse behind.
Yes. But when you're dealing with emotions of a sort that you can't even understand, because I didn't have bio children at that point. I nannied. I had a little brother who I helped raise. Like I understood child rearing.
Sure.
But I did not understand being a biological parent. And so I wasn't taking into consideration the fears, the anxiety, the stress that comes with somebody else coming in and almost like auditing your parenting.
That's a great way to put it. Now that you have children, now that you have bio children, is that something that came to fruition after having them?
I think it came before then, just through a lot of therapy and conversation.
Sure.
But I think that it's hit home more now that I have kids. Although I know that I need help, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas,
what do you mean you need help?
Everybody needs help with kids, parenting.
Okay. Yeah,
I need to ask someone, when do I do this? When do I have no idea?
Yes.
And I don't have time to Google it.
Okay,
so I just call someone, right?
I was thinking on a much deeper
no.
level.
Well, I do need help. Everybody needs help.
Yes.
But yes. But, for Dan, he never used help. He never took help. He never had help.
Yeah.
So for me to come in and ask these questions and to kind of push and probe, it's like, whoa. I've never even had to sit and look at this. So now you're making me do it.
Yes.
And I don't like it. Right? So I needed to take a step back and say, well, how am I asking these questions in a way that's going to relate to Dan or, be more of a partnership and a conversation than me just spitballing my ideas? Because in my mind, it wasn't disrespectful, but to him, it was.
Right.
Right. So I could be direct and respectful in my own mind and it not come out that way to someone else, right? Depending on their situation. So
that's when you just say, I didn't intend
exactly
to do this.
Exactly. But what I've learned is that you have to almost start with the why of why you're asking or bringing something up in order to, kind of lay the foundation.
So give me an example. So the kid does something terrible and you need to bring it to the other parents.
Well, no. So if they make a decision on something.
Okay. So the decision's been made.
Right. Say the decision has been made that the curfew can be later.
Okay.
And it's, 12 o'clock, but they're 16. And I'm like, well, by law, they're not supposed to be out driving that late, right?
Right.
So why did you decide to change it? I thought we had talked about it being 11, right? I want to know because I want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. Not I want to know because I think you're making the wrong choice and 12 is too late. While that may be the case, I may disagree with the parenting decision. That's not why I'm asking.
So you would say, I want to know why we moved the curfew when I thought we had decided that it was going to be this?
Yeah, what changed so that I can understand where you're coming from. So if I'm ever in the position to, hey, can I stay out later or whatever it may be, I have the same answer as him.
Girl, I'm going to use that shit with all my kids. That's so great.
Yeah, it's really hard to do because I would normally come out and be like, wait, I thought we said 11.
100%
right?
I would have said.
And to me, that's not rude. I'm just asking the question. But when you are the parent and you have someone who's not the biological parent, but has an authoritative role, but all these buts and ifs and whats, it can be really contentious unintentionally.
That's very true, because if I decided that I was going to change my kid's curfew and he never had to run it by anybody and now all of a sudden he's having to. I mean,
yeah, he's collaborating with me, right? Like
yes.
It comes back to the word partnership. You just got to be partners. It's not even about, equal playing field or anything like that. Like I have as much say as you do. It's not about power or authority. It's about being a partnership. And the way that I came in and I thought I was doing it the right way, but I knew no different.
Sure.
All I was bringing in was how I was raised. And that didn't take into consideration how Dan was raised, how he had raised his kids for the first 9 years of their life, how, where we live, right? The culture of where we live is different. The time in which they're being raised is different than when I was raised. So
Sure.
all of those things I didn't take into consideration. And in my mind, I was just asking them because that was in my head and I don't ever keep anything inside. I just ask it before I think about it, right? So you have to really, as you're parenting with somebody who is that biological parent, really take into account the emotion behind being a parent and the decisions they're making. Because sometimes, sometimes we make decisions and we don't even really know why, or we go back on it or say, why did we do that? Right?
And I just tell my kids, I'm like, hey, I'm allowed to change my mind. And as you get older, you are too. Something that you were okay with, if you are no longer okay with it, it's okay to not be okay with it.
Yes.
Like, you need to speak up. Can I ask a personal question?
Yeah.
Do you and Dan go to therapy together?
We do.
Do you really?
Yes. We have, even before we were married.
Really? And
Yes.
you've just kept it up?
We've had hiatuses where we don't go.
Sure.
Or there's been a year or two where we don't go. And then if time is, hard to find.
Sure.
But actually it's been really, really great since COVID because therapy has gone online. So even now with the babies, we can still do it from our living room, right? So we go together one week, then I go alone the next week, then we go together, and then he goes alone the week after that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And is there always something to talk about?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
'Cause
even if it's just not even related to our relationship,
just like working on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I have to give you an honest comment here. I've never been to therapy before.
I went to therapy before I even knew Dan. I have really bad anxiety.
Sure.
I didn't realize it till I was an adult. And then I finally was like, oh my God, that's the feeling I've been feeling since I was a kid. Oh, makes sense now. Right? So I've been going for other reasons, right? But I have found that it is just really helpful in communication. And your thoughts may not change. Your opinions may not change, but it's
The delivery will change.
The delivery, it's the reception of things. It's understanding what those triggers are and how to walk away from them, how to compromise. And, Dan has very different needs than I have.
Sure.
And so, if we're in an argument and he needs 5 minutes, I used to not give him that 5 minutes. He'd be like, no, we're going to figure this out right now. You better not leave this room. I'll block the doorway if I have to.
Girl, we are cut from the same cloth.
I need resolution now or I will feel anxious for the rest of the night. But he's like, I need 10 minutes, right? But before it was like he would just walk out and I would go running after him. Or I would probe and then he'd finally lose it, right?
Right.
Now it's through therapy, we've realized, okay, I can give him this 5 minutes and know that we're okay.
So you think it was more your anxiety of like, we're not okay.
100%.
Okay.
100%. And, with him just walking out, then I'm like, now I'm going down a rabbit hole of he doesn't care that I'm not all right.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So with him knowing that and understanding my perspective of why I was probing, he's less inclined to just take the 5 minutes without saying anything. Right?
Which is probably better because if you give him that 5 minutes, he's going to collect his thoughts. And it's funny because Sweetie Pie and I were recently into it in an effort to keep everything very transparent. And I left to Texas last week, as you know, for work. And we were not 100%. We certainly weren't, 50%, but we certainly were not 100%. And I get in the car and I texted him and I said, I am really beside myself that you let me leave without us being 100%. And then I switched next paragraph and I was like, this is what we have going on this week. This is what needs to be taken care of. I set everything up. I started dinner. And then I added, at the end, I was just like, put the crock pot on warm at 4:30. Dinner will be done for you guys or whatever, as I was leaving. And he messages me back and he's like, I have to be honest with you. I know we're not 100%, but I don't even know why. And that's so...
It's like the most man thing.
Bless Sweetie Pie. And I'm like, okay, I literally told you, because again, I blurt things out. I don't keep anything in. I literally told you. I text messaged you. Are you laughing because you do this too? Yeah. See, it's, okay. It's totally anything. Yeah. Poor Billy. But I'm like, I texted you what my problem was, and then I got upset about what was bothering me. Mm-hmm. And you still were like, okay, all right, that's nice. What the hell?
Yeah.
So then I told him, I was like, listen, if you know something's bothering me and you don't seem to know what it is, assume that I've told you, but then follow up and ask me.
Ask.
Because if you don't ask, then I think he heard me and he doesn't give a shit, or he doesn't realize that I'm upset with him, and how much more obvious could I make it? So it's a little bit lunatic-ish, but
well, I was thinking about, on my way here, I was thinking about what are the 2 or 3 things that are required in a good parenting relationship in a blended family.
Please.
And I think communication and grace.
Okay.
Because without communication, this is why I'm asking, or I think I said last time, this is a parenting issue, not a step parenting issue. I'm just annoyed of my teenagers, period.
Yep.
And without any of that, or without him saying, hey, I need 10 minutes, it can spiral so quickly out of control because it is a very triggering environment. When you're dealing with an ex-spouse, when you're dealing with kids that you aren't technically raising, but live in your house, right? Mm-hmm. Or when you're dealing with the aspects of a blended family, it can be very triggering and complex. So without that communication, you're never going to resolve any issues. And then grace, because none of us know what the hell we're doing.
Right.
And I have to assume that my spouse is coming from a good place with good intentions, and he needs to assume I am too, right? If I'm questioning his parenting and I'm not the biological parent, he has to assume that I'm coming from a place of, I just want us to be on the same page, not, oh, she thinks I'm a bad parent, or she doesn't love my kids, or something like that. But in a blended family, that's often where it goes when it gets emotional. So I have to give him that grace of he's emotional. He's, these are triggers. These are things that are uncomfortable. And he has to have that same grace for me. And, she's never been a stepmom before this. So it's new to her also. She's never been a parent before this. So it's new to her. That is so
good. You're amazing. You're therapy.
I was going to say shout out to my therapist.
Shout out Dr. such and such. Then the last thing that I want to know is, granted, my son is, an adult now, so it's very different now. Now we get to be besties, and I get to love on my daughter-in-law and all the things. But for somebody who's just stepping into it, aside from getting into therapy, I think that that's a huge thing, massive pro therapy. What would you say, or what would you encourage them to do to make sure that the communication stays open and that the grace is given on both sides? Side note, I do think that communicating that you will need grace is a huge aspect in all of this. Coming to them and being like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Yeah. And whether you have kids or you don't, do you think if we had kids, it would be easier?
No.
bio kids first?
No, I actually think it would have been harder. And I've thought a lot about this over the years too, because imagine bringing kids from two different families into the same family who grew up different with different rules, and they have two other parents. So now they have four people telling them maybe not the same thing. No, I honestly don't think it would have worked if I had kids already.
I agree with you. I was thinking more from like I'm going to treat your kids how I would want my kids treated type of aspect.
Yeah.
So, but that would be a very small aspect in the whole scheme of things, because that's true. That would be I don't even like Sweetie Pie yelling at our kids now. Like, can you imagine if it was my kid and not his kid? I'd be like, what you yelling at my kid for? Like, are you out of your mind?
I mean, a lot of people do it, and a lot of people make it work. A lot. I know. I mean, I personally know a lot of people who make it work.
Sure.
But I know it had to have been very difficult for them as well. I mean, it's difficult in every situation, to be honest, but that's a whole other level of complexity.
That's
now,
amazing.
You know, I had to think about his kids and how are they feeling? How are they reacting? What role do they want me to play?
That's true.
But if I had brought my own, and I would have been like, okay, now how do my kids feel about the other kids? How do my kids feel about Dan? How do I, like, it would have been too much.
Too many people involved.
Yeah, too much.
So back to my original question. Is there anything aside from therapy that you think would help in communication and stuff like that? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, there's a few things. And the first one to me is faith.
Okay.
I fully believe in, following Jesus Christ and knowing that he loves me no matter what. He loves my husband no matter what. He loves my stepchildren no matter what. So at the end of the day, that's really what matters, and that's what I need to follow. So for me, faith is huge, and Dan and I going to church together has honestly been a game changer for our marriage.
Amen. I like that. Okay.
And
it doesn't have to be the Christian faith, like whatever faith you want to do, but finding faith. I agree. Faith. I love that.
And then phone a friend, really. I have a friend who's a stepmom who has very similar experiences to me, eerily similar. And I can text her and say whatever I want in whatever form or fashion I want to say it in, with no judgment. And whether I then take that information and talk to my spouse about it, may not be, but I can get it out and just be like blurt out all the mean, angry things I'm thinking without getting into trouble. So I think finding a friend outside of your spouse who can relate to, and I've talked to you a lot about step parenting, and that was a huge help early on. And
I was very encouraging of how do I say this? I was very encouraging of the parents.
Yeah.
Right? Because my approach was with somebody who was very different than your bio mom. So it was like, no, you're not allowed to not like me. I don't know that there was ever that saying that was going to work for your situation. No. Not even a like level, but just at least a respect level.
Yeah.
So anyways, needless to say, so definitely phone a friend 100%.
Yeah, I also firmly believe that you're never going to get everything you need out of one person, even if that's your spouse.
Okay, I agree.
So, that's why having a hobby or a career or friends and family, and
we're definitely not encouraging another boyfriend career.
No, that's too much.
That's way too much.
I'm never going to be able to get everything I need from my spouse, and so having that outside perspective of a friend is really important. And a lot of self-work, reading books, listening to podcasts, right? Hearing from other people's perspective and really taking that into account, and honestly being open to feedback.
That I think is the hardest thing.
Being open to feedback can be very hard, and I deal with it a lot at work, so maybe it's a little easier for me.
Sure.
But no one likes it when your spouse comes to you and said, well, you did this and it really hurt my feelings. Well, but this and that and this, right? You want to defend yourself because you're like, well, I know I wasn't meaning that in a bad way.
Right.
But being able to just listen and say, okay, I will try to do that better next time is really hard to do. It's so simple, but being able to take feedback and really actually implement it can be a complete game changer in the form of receiving grace back.
Okay. I love that so much. I'm working on I'm sorry's, because it's funny. Sometimes I don't know when to be sorry. I'm like, oh, you want me to be sorry for that? Okay. I'm so sorry. I never meant to do this or that. But sometimes it does have to be told to me. So I am open to hearing new things.
Yeah. It can be really hard. It can be really hard because
I'm right most of the time. So it's
honestly.
in my mind, I'm right.
But
so
you know what? Even when you think you're right and know you're right, it's still worth it because then you're giving that.
Eat some crow.
Yeah.
know.
You're communicating that person's feeling matters to you.
And at the end of the day, even when you're mad, it does matter to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are a wealth of knowledge. I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful that I have you as a friend and my family, as I like to call you. And I just thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this with me. So I think you're one of the best moms that I know, and I'm grateful to have you as a friend.
Well, I learn a lot from you, honestly. It's been
you.
so helpful to have you in my corner navigating through stepmom life.
Always.
Even just not from your stepmom experience, but just your parenting experience. It's been really nice to have you as a friend.
And I'm grateful that you come to me. So thank you for being on the show today. I love you.
You too.